Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody can hear me well. If anybody has any technical issues, please, as we said, log them if you can through the chat or through the questions area. Today's webinar is all about leveraging the sequence user experience, making the UI, or the more modern term UX, the user experience, more intuitive, easier, quicker, and the like. When I started putting together the materials for this webinar, I found the quote from Enrique Jardiel Poncela: "When something can be read without effort, great effort has gone into its writing." I think that's a motto that we should all follow over here. It indicates a lot. If our workflow is simple to use, means that and people understand it intuitively without a great amount of training and troubles, then we did our part. We did a great deal. It's not something trivial to achieve. What I'd like to go over during today's webinar are these headers. The first, we'll go through it as a workflow. In other words, each activity in the workflow, each form or task in the workflow will demonstrate one of these subjects, and you can, of course, use them together. We just separated them for simplicity's sake. We'll start out with visual affirmation for the user. As you go through, as you click through the controls, if you've planned it carefully enough, you can even do it, by tabbing through all the controls and filling out your stuff, and how you can indicate to the users that they're doing fine as they go through, and not just at the end. The next activity will be of the type of the approval view type. How you can create a form or a task. This is typically for managers, where you collect everything that the requester placed, and you don't display it as just text boxes, because that's not clear. I mean, what am I supposed to be reading, and what am I supposed to be writing over here? It's not clear. So you display whatever needs to be displayed as read-only, and you show the rest as true text boxes, and we'll get to that. The third one will be, I call it the power of inaction, how disabling controls can sometimes save you a lot of effort. We'll go over control customization, in the sense not just removing, but modifying the behavior of controls for certain controls. In the example that we'll bring over here, how you can change attachment controls. We'll go over the user experience of tabs, the built-in sequence tabs up on top versus the workflow tree on the left, and how you can use them together and separately. We'll go over a different option of using internal tabs, built frames or subforms inside your form, and how you can use them internally. We'll go over what the pros and cons of those are. Towards the end, we'll do two relatively simple ideas, but I find that they're very useful. Dividing up our form real estate into quadrants. We'll get to that and show what that is. And following that, we'll have the activity on. Now that we've finished the form, we've clicked on update. There is another cool thing you can add. For simplicity and for good looks. And lastly, we'll finish off with the form concept and design. A few tips for before you even sit down to the technical bit. How different audiences should have different types of forms at the very fundamental level. So we can get started on the visual affirmation. How you can easily demonstrate to your user whether they're progressing well, whether what they're doing is in their form or task is what you expect them to do. Sorry, just a second. Apologies, I seem to be having some network issues. Just two moments, please. Now, the importance of this is sometimes overlooked. For the more experienced users, you go through the form, you understand what's expected of you, and you can fill it out easily. You understand what each control is. The novice user will many times have trouble with what's expected of them. So the idea is, as you're tabbing through the activities, over to the right of each of these controls is a hidden image for yes or for no. It could be anything, any indicator, green or red, whatever you want it to be. So if I choose this tab and I don't fill anything out, and I go and I click away from it, I blur away from it, it'll expose the no image, meaning wait, don't progress. You did something wrong over here. Then I say, okay, now I have to figure it out. Okay, it's whatever I need it to be. And it's replaced with the indicator for yes, it's fine. What you did over here is correct. And the same thing with each of these with each of the controls. If I go and I leave them as they shouldn't be, they have the no icon is exposed. If I fill it out correctly, I have yes. So by the time I work my way down, and again, this is a simple three control form. If it's a big form, by the time I work my way down, I have a clear visual index. I pick my head up, I look around. If everything's green, then I'm cool, then I'm ready to go. Now, how do we go about creating this? This actually is very simple JavaScript. There's no jQuery over here or anything like that. I'll move them around so you can see them. There are two images, one on top of each other. Over here, so that you can they're exposed in the same coordinates when you expose them as necessary. And the mechanism for doing it is basic JavaScript. Now, I am aware that for everything that I did over here can be done differently. It can be done with jQuery and can be done with external functions and everything. I did it over here in this rudimentary fashion so that it's very clear for anybody that wants to implement it. I should mention this whole workflow will be published together with the recording, so anybody can make use of the snippets that we have over here. When the form is born, all of the images are set to be hidden. You can do this in a loop, I know. And then for each of the controls, we add an event handler. The naming is done automatically. You choose the name of the field over here, and you choose the event type over here, and you click Add. The events are added automatically. And it's from that point of view, it's pretty simple English. It's add a form field event handler for whatever the name of the control is, and the second parameter is the name of the event. Blur in JavaScript means when I take my control and I take it away from there, either to the background or to another activity. And what I'm doing here is simple. I'm checking if the value is empty or if the value is null. Each of them has minor variations. Then I expose whichever image I want to. Again, you could name the images more properly. It would be easier. I can expose them, either make the image, the yes image exposed and the no image hidden, or the other way around, all depending on the incoming values. And again, as I said, the added value is that if you have a big form, a complex form, and relatively novice users, they get a very clear idea of what's expected of them along the way. And if you have something wrong, look again, and rather than coming to the end and starting to figure out, or perhaps even scrolling up to figure out where they went wrong in filling out the form. So that's the first visual affirmation bit, and how it's done. I'll stop for questions if anybody has any. Please indicate it through the chat or questions, or I'll unmute everybody right now. Actually, no, sorry, I can't unmute at the moment. So if anybody has questions, please pass them in through the chat. Okay, no questions, so we can continue with the approval view. How to go about how to generate a form for approvers. So if we go back right now, we didn't change anything vital over here. We can continue through the workflow. I picked what I picked over here randomly. This is in my capacity as a user, and the workflow now progresses onto a manager task. Now, if I want to give the manager a clear idea of what they're expected to fill out, then I can just display the values that are meant for read only as labels, as simple text. If I don't show this, if I show this like it is over here, again, you can edit it so that it's bigger, or prettier, or bold, or whatever else. But if I take it out of the context of a text box, then the person says, okay, this is what I'm reading, and at the end I'll add in whatever, a combo box or a radio box at the end for the approval. And now whoever's approving of this knows what he's meant to read and what they're meant to fill out, and you make a clear differentiation. How did we do this? This is actually part of the done through XSLT, and I'll explain. We're looking at the manager approval form over here. So what we did, as you can see over here in the designer, by the way, it's plain text boxes. There's no labels. There's no JavaScript or anything like that. It's real text boxes, and it's a real date form. But what we changed, if you notice in the bottom left, where I'm marking right now, rather than using the default add form.xslt, I made a copy of it, and I called my own add form manager XSLT, and made two very simple changes. Again, this is for the proof of concept for text boxes and dates. It works for everything else. I'll take us back to the XSLT files so you get the idea. Each XSLT entry point, the add form and all of its variants are entry points. They're only references which call on the really big XSLT files. So if you look over here at the default add form XSLT file, what it does, it calls in the items XSLT for Internet Explorer users, and this is historical a bit, the items Firefox XSLT. And the items XSLT is where all the hard work happens. So if you look into the default items XSLT, it does take some knowledge to manipulate it. This doesn't come intuitively to us object-oriented programmers. But the idea is it's very clearly remarked out, so you can see what it's meant to do. It goes over all of the controls that were entered on the form, and it checks them. When your type of this EC79, which means when you're a type of a text box, and you have it over here in the remarks over here, then I expect you to do the following: add an attribute for the style and give it a certain style. Add an attribute for the name and take it from the ID, from the raw XML, and add an attribute for the value. That's for a text box, and then take the value from the XML. This is all XPath, simple XPath over here, and wrap it all up into a control of the type of input type text. I want to do something else. As we said in my items, I don't want it to be a text box, because if it's a text box, it could confuse the novice user into thinking they have to fill something out over here, even if it's disabled. So I said, instead of making it a text box, I just said render it as a div, as a plain unedited bit of text, and rather than putting it as a text box and then adding the value, just take the raw thing. Take the text over here as it is, and put it in as a snippet of text inside the div. And what that does for me, if I do it clearly and concisely, it takes it and it renders it as a readable document. If you put in all your controls as a readable document, that's how it goes in. I did it over here in the text box, and if you scroll down a bit, it's the same principle for the date picker. Just a second. Here we have it, whereas in the default items, if you go down, the date picker has all the has the image and everything else. It renders a whole table with the image file and the on click and what happens over there. Everything else you take all of that out, because we don't need the functionality. And instead of that, we just put in the basic styles and then say, give me the value of what comes inside over there. And in our case, what you get from that is the date as it's displayed over here. This is the value that's saved. So we're going over basic XSLT manipulation, and I know it's not simple, it's not trivial stuff. But as I said, just to recap, if you're going for the basic stuff, if you change just the outside control, where instead of an input control, you put a div, it can make a world of difference. It's really simple. So that's about the approval view, how to make read-only and simplified controls for approval view. And does anybody have questions until this point, please? Okay, just the one question so far for that. When in this case I place the values, I use default values, but you can actually borrow the whole thing. You can create a duplicate of a form exactly like the original, and on that duplicate, not the same one, and on your duplicate, point it to the same data table, same UAC table. And use the workflow instance ID as your key. So everything that happens on the first form is rendered exactly the same thing on the second, only in a different format, in a different read-only format. That is definitely a possibility, especially when you're talking about huge forms, and you'd rather do that than to use default values 100 times. Okay, so we're done with the approval view, and here's something that I really connected to myself, one of the most common things that happened to me. I'll show you. The power of inaction. If we go back to the runtime now, and we move on to the next activity. This is a task that was assigned to a group of people. I wrote it in over here like this just to show you the view of the different objects. And how many times has it happened to you when you see this and you didn't read the top, this task is assigned to a queue, to fetch this task, click here. You don't know what that means, to fetch the task. You just want to fill it in and write in all the stuff and then submit. And what you don't notice is if you start writing in your stuff, and then you look for the submit button. You say, oh, there is no submit button. So I say, oh, now I have to fetch. It says I have to fetch the task. So you fetch the task, and everything you wrote in until that point is gone, because the form went back was submitted to the server, and it came back in its default format, empty. Terribly annoying, and especially for the novice users, something you want to try and avoid. So in this case, what I'll show in a moment how it was done, but you'll have to believe me that I'm flicking around over here, and you can see over here where it's grayed out. All of the controls are disabled before I fetch it. If I go and fetch the task, it goes to the server, as I said, and it comes back, and voila, all of my controls are once more active. How do we do this? This is jQuery based, which means that you'll need, if you're only a novice in JavaScript, you'll need to do a little bit of reading about it. But the principle I'll go over in a moment. And what's even cooler, it's generic, so that if you want this to be the general behavior in your sequence tasks, you can put this into the common JavaScript file one time, and it'll apply to all the broadcast queue tasks and all the workflows. And it could very well be something you would want to do it at that sort of level. How did we do this? I'll open up the workflow editor, and we'll have a look how it's done. This is the generic bit of code. It has nothing to do with the particular name of a control or a particular task. This is it works for everything, and the operation is so. The first thing, of course, we're basing ourselves on is that this client-side code, this bit of client-side code that each task comes with, what to do when you submit and everything else, is only a fraction of all of the client-side code that's rendered from the system files and from everything else when you finally look at the sequence form. There's a whole lot going on in the background, and we're depending on two of those elements. The first of them is this variable over here, perm code. When you load a form in sequence, if you look at the source of it, a great many parameters are displayed. I'll show you. This used to be a lot harder in sequence 4. There's a ton of JavaScript on how to render everything and all the view states and everything else. But one useful bit for this and for many other things, if you want, is this cluster over here of variables. A lot of this can be useful, and when you're designing your form for any matter of things. And one of the parameters over here is the perm code. It can be a value between 1 and 3, where 1 is read only, 2 is read and write, and 3 is full control. So when you have when the form is rendered before you fetch it, your permissions are only read only. At the form level, it's a read only. You can type stuff into the text box and choose things, but you can't submit. And only when you fetched it, like we did over here, the perm code, when it comes back fetched, it comes back as 2 or 3, depending on your permissions. And this parameter is what we're basing ourselves on over here in this JavaScript query. If it's smaller than 2, meaning if you read only, then it's going to go ahead and do a great many jQuery calls. Now, $J, I'm not going to go very far into it, is a variable that's already created with all the other jQuery background stuff, and we'll have a look at that also. Sorry, I forgot to show that to you in one go. Actually, this is later on. This is to modify the tree. So just a second. Here it is. This is where it starts off, the jQuery. And with jQuery, once you've had that the jQuery call, you can call essentially you can use it to call all of with the what's called jQuery select syntax. And you can use that select syntax to call any manner of different controls. So what you're saying over here for each of them is use the jQuery object, find me all of the images, and add an attribute and set the attribute disabled to be disabled. And the same thing for everything else: the radio boxes, the text areas, everything the same idea. With one interesting exception, because it's the syntax is a bit different, is over here this browse underscore. When you have advanced combo boxes, method called SB, etc., it's actually two separate controls. It's not really a combo box. It's a text box and an image next to it. And that image always starts out with the name browse underscore. So what you're doing is you're saying, find me everything that's similar to browse underscore, like the equivalent in SQL if you would, and disable those also. And this generic bit of code is what's responsible for disabling all of the controls, no matter what their name or location, before you've fetched the form. Are there any questions about this particular functionality, please? There is one other method. Yes, you can disable everything by placing a div object on top of everything with a semi-transparent div object, and we'll briefly touch on that with an example from a customer, an implementation from a customer. That is one way. But again, there are pros and cons to placing div objects like that also. But this is the generic way that you can get it done very simply. Okay. The next sort of thing, and this is for those of you that are familiar with the support workflow, you'll see that I cheated and I borrowed some of our own development, is about control customization. Not just to render it read-only in such a way that for approvers and things like that, but to actually change its behavior under certain circumstances. And I'm talking about what we're doing, what we're going to show over here is attachments. When you have an attachment control, this is again a little bit not intuitive. If you need to download the file that's there, you need to double click it. And you know, the web users sometimes find that a little bit less than intuitive. And so what this is, I should give credit where credit is due. This is from Yuval from our UK team that originally created this. So what we do is we evaluate it. If it's an empty attachment, then it's got to be the way it is, you know, with the button and the text box, so that it's clear. But once it's been populated, let's make it into something clear for the user. And when I say clear for the user, let's have a look at the example. We'll move on with the workflow. Okay. So as I said, I have a parent form over here. I just made it to vaguely look like a normal form, and I have a multi-row subform with attachments. And inside this grid, I can choose whichever files I have over here. Just a second. When I choose the files, when I choose a file over here, the idea is to have it render differently after it's been populated. Seems to be Explorer froze a little bit. Just one moment, please. Ah, here it is. Okay. So once I've pushed it, pushed the plus button, I will send the form back, and now it's loaded back up with its original value. And you can see that ABC is no longer displayed as that. The button is gone, and it was made as a simple URL. Whereas at the single click, I can choose, I can click on it, and it will offer to download the file. How is this done? Again, this is XSLT manipulation, and it's done over here. Going into the XSLT file that's responsible for this. This is items attachments. Again, this of course this can be collected into one XSLT file if that's the common behavior you would like for all of your forms. We did it over here for the obvious reason that that this is meant as a demo. Sorry. I'm not going to go into the whole bit over here, but as you can see, this is the original place, the original location for the XSLT, and you can go over this on one-on-one. The idea is over here also, where you have the default behavior on double click and everything else, and where you can change it, to behave differently. I can find it actually easily. It's form.gif. That's the image that we display. So instead of doing what it normally does, you tell it you can change the behavior to show, you know, the background, the blue color, etc., etc., and where to, and that the little icon over here next to it, little form icon next to it, and change the behavior so that it's a lot more intuitive. Oh, there's a file over there. Click on that. That looks like a link. Click on that and download the file. Are there any questions until on this control customization? Absolutely, the XSLTs as they're used over here will be included in the download, so that you can learn from them. Okay, let's continue then. The next thing is also, this is depends on which, there's a great divide among the implementers that when I cover this. The popularity of tabs versus the popularity of on the top, the blue built-in sequence tabs, versus the tree on the left that describes the workflow and the different task recipients. They each have their uses, and they can occasionally even be complementary to each other because they show different things. I'll get back to exactly how complementary in a second. Of course, the solution over here is JavaScript based. What exactly we can do over here. Now, when I say complementary, there's a pro and con to each of them. On the one hand, the tabs on top is something that people are used to. It's very clear. You go right and left, and it's there. But if your workflow is not quite linear, if there's a great deal of looping and there's a great deal of backwards and forwards and splits, the tabs don't represent a clear view of where it went and when it went and how many different times it went through different tasks. On the other hand, they take up a lot of space, and the novice user doesn't know how to read the tree. So it really depends on the context of what you're creating over here. And let's have a look at the possible solutions to this. If we go back to our demo environment over here. Now you notice something interesting. This form, when it loaded, decided to push aside the tree, and we'll show how it's done to the left, and to make room. This would be typically useful. As you can see over here, I borrowed some images from the PNMsoft website. If your form, take it as a given, requires a great deal of screen real estate. It's wide, it's big. I can't make it any smaller, and the tree isn't necessarily what I need at this time for my users. The typical the situation would be where the need for monitor real estate outdoes the value of the tree, and so I want to hide it. The way to do that, and we'll show that in a second in the JavaScript, is to borrow, in essence. You have the control over here that's meant to hide and unhide the screen, and the way to do it is to borrow a snippet of that system code and just to add it onto the form loading event, so that as soon as the form loads, you simulate a click of the button, and the tree disappears to the left. It's still visible if you want it, like we saw that what I did over here. But by default, it lets us see Bill Gates in a very pretty manner. How is this done? Just a moment. Let's go back to the workflow editor, and I'll show you. Now you can see over here the placeholders for Bill Gates and for everything else. It is wide. It takes up a great deal of space, and I want to figure out a way to get around it. The way to do that is up over here. As I said, we're adding a load event handler, and this is borrowed code, as it were, from the sequence system JavaScript. This is what happens when you click on the button. It gets itself a reference of whatever it needs, the buttons in the left-hand tree, and it decides what to display, and then it says the grid, set it to be nothing, and change the button, of course, so that it now displays the collapse right, which means push it back to being visible. You can copy this as is. And use it, like I said, you can use it in the load event. And the upside is, if we go back to the runtime for a moment, the replacement of it, if we leave it as it was originally, instead of using the tree, you can go now. You can go and see the previous forms using the tabs up on top. Like I said before, there are pros and cons to it with a less linear workflow, or if you have a great deal of activities and the people aren't quite aware which goes where. But the idea is that this is an alternative, and it's sometimes a very valuable alternative for certain solutions. So we covered that, the tabs work versus the workflow tree and the pros and cons of it. Are there any questions, please? Okay. The next thing we want to look at then are a different flavor of tabs. We call them internal tabs or client-side based tabs. And just a second. You have to think about the usage. We'll get to the, you know what, first let me show you how it's done, and then perhaps we'll go back to the deliberation on when it's useful. So let's continue our workflow over here. That's embarrassing. My connectivity seems to be lost. Just a moment, please. Here we are. So this is the tabs, as we said, and we can continue on to the next behavior.
There is one question from Nuno.
Absolutely, around just a second. Let me see. No. As to following your questions, you can, of course, this JavaScript can be set to respond to anything on the form. The change of a checkbox value, of course, you can check if it's checked and do exactly the same thing, moving things backwards and forwards. It's valid. The state value is depending if you're making it from visible to invisible or the other way around. In this case, we want to keep it always invisible, even when after it loads, because the assumption is if you made it invisible once, you intend to do that constantly. The real code shows will change it backwards and forwards from 0 to 1. Okay. Now we can continue. All right. As we started the internal tabs, the idea of them is this. You have a single form, and however many, in this case I placed 3 subforms on it, and we'll go through the client-side code in a second. You need to fill out whatever needs to be filled out on the subforms, but the idea is you can tab through them in order. If you want to make it, some nice icon that does it, you can tab through them in order and go back and forth between them as necessary. So you go through whatever needs to be done over here and save them. We'll go over first the why you would do it as an explanation, and then we'll go into the client-side code, which isn't very complicated, on the how. Typically, from what I've seen, this sort of solution is meant for when you need to collect a lot of information, and the form, typically, again, this can be for other things, but from what I saw, is what's called a long duration task. This isn't something, you look at and you say, you fill out what needs to be filled out, make a decision, and be done with it and forget about it. There are many tasks that require a lot of information gathering. There's a central node of information, and that person is collecting it, be it sometimes even, printed information or things like that. And they'd be browsing through the different entry points. Each of these mini tabs or internal tabs would be an entry point, and they need to save the information locally. As they slowly collect the information, this could be, in some cases I've seen, weeks that a task is stuck, not stuck, is waiting at a certain point, slowly adding information until it's ready to complete. What you do need to consider is that it's very elusive. It's very, you might think, okay, each time I'm loading just the one form. I'm looking at this over here. I just have the two fields and a button. There's no big deal. And when I press it, the new information comes. But that's not so, because when you load this, everything, all of the sum total of all the mini tabs are loaded in. Now it's no big deal if you have the right hardware for it and you have a reasonable amount of subforms over here. It's no big deal and you can control it. But you would want to consider this carefully if you're talking about a very massive use solution for a great many users. Another thing that you'll see when we look at the JavaScript is you have to look at it very carefully. It's not quite trivial to scale. You have to plan how you create the JavaScript so that it becomes manageable, not only with the 3 mini tabs if you have more. And lastly, before we go into the JavaScript, this is all visible to the client, where normally, if you look at a typical workflow, you give somebody a form, then you're showing them what you want them to see. This is the sum of what I want you to do. And when you're done with that, you might send it back, and then I might send you something else. If your solution involves hiding some of this, pressing this and only exposing the button when some condition happens, regardless of what you're exposing visually, it's all here in the view source. In other words, if somebody looks, and they can go through the code and find all the requests and all the fields and everything else. Usually not a big deal, but it is something to consider. Let's go on and have a look into the actual client-side code of how this is done. I should have moved these around. Each of these, by the way, these are the 3 subforms, the mini tabs that we're going through. I borrowed the concept. Not very necessarily, but just from the Amazon checkout. And here also you can see it's not that easy. All 3 subforms are occupying the same place over here. They're one on top of each other, and inside the client-side code is where I manipulate it all. The first place is during the load activity. As I said before, even if you don't see them, the work happens. We're opening up, each of the subforms is opened into its iframe, and we choose item 1, subform number 1, the identification subform, to be the one that's visible, and the other 2 to be hidden. And we choose button number 1 to be in red, so that indicates which one we're on, and the other 2 to remain in their default black. And for each one of these, if you look at them, again, the naming over here, I did it on purpose. You have to believe me, I did it on purpose. So I didn't want the attention to go to the design, but button 1 fitting in with item 1, and for each one of them, you designate what happens when you click the button. When you click on button 1, then item 1 becomes visible, and the button becomes red, and everything else. When you click on button 2, it's meant to make item 2 visible with its button together, and the same button number 3 to make 3 visible. As you can see, this very quickly would become spaghetti code. You could make it a bit more efficient by sending just the control name to a central JavaScript function, and have that based on the control name do all the work. You could do that. Again, this was done for simplicity to show the options, the way to do it. Are there any questions until now, please? All right, let's continue then. Let's close this up. Here's another suggestion. Again, this is most of my wisdom. All of my wisdom comes from other people. This is another thing that I've seen. For no better word that I could find for it, I call it dividing up your forms into quadrants. And I'll explain. This is an internal form that we have that we had originally designed for the support workflow, and not very intuitive what you need to fill out, what's there. You don't always catch what you need to do. And this is the same form. Everything stayed the same thing, but only divided it up. We divided it up into the 4 functional bits that you're supposed to do. The first one is the analysis. Choose if you want to send a message back to the person that opened the ticket. The bottom left is about the incoming details, and the bottom right, if you already have any attachments to the ticket at this point. If you look at it, if you compare the two, just adding the color in. It's all divided into the same place. The real estate is the same thing. Just adding the color in makes it for the human eye, divides it up. Okay, these are categories. Human mind is meant to work with categories and with predetermined ideas. Categories, 4 colors, 4 categories. Now I can divide them up and treat each one of them separately. And that's how that was a very interesting solution. I even saw, by the way, I don't have the example over here, that if you do it the right colors with a gradient of colors, you can even 99% of the people will fill them out in a specific order. But that's a separate thing. Two more things to cover, like we said in the beginning. Now that we've updated, and then some final thoughts on the form. This also comes from the field, from Itai in Portugal. Like we said in the beginning, occasionally, under certain circumstances, you want to say, now that you've submitted the form, especially if these are heavy forms, that might take a little bit longer than what the user expects. I don't want the user to click submit again. I don't want them to change anything in the middle. I don't want them to do something that might crash the form. And one trick that you can see over here, it's a little bit difficult to follow. Sorry. You can see over here it's a semi-transparent div with it's an animation in the middle over here. This bit over here, and it's a rotating animation that gives you the idea. Wait patiently, please. We need this will be done, and you'll see the indication once it is. The last category for this webinar is more theoretical, but I think I found it vital when you start at the planning stage of your forms and tasks. When you're doing it, there is no such a thing as a design that's right for everybody. You need to think who the form is meant to be filled out, who your audience is before you begin to speak. Is this meant for a manager that's typically that wants a quick, concise, shortened, quick, total sort of idea, 3 or 4 controls, and give me a text box to fill in a combo box to fill in yes or no? Or is this meant for a technical user that's meant to give in a whole lot of details and everything else, or perhaps for a beginner? For each one of these, you want to design your form differently. You want to think about where the minimal amount of time wasting for the manager. Your typical technical user won't mind an extra 2 clicks if they understand, if they have a clear idea of what's going on. And the beginner wants to have the clear indications, like we showed at the beginning, with the validation after each time you leave a control, red or green, yes or no, to get an idea. When you're doing this, think about how long you expect it to take somebody to complete the form. My personal non-committing experience shows if you have a form, if you have to scroll, I don't like scrolling at all, but if you have to scroll more than 2 screen lengths, then it's usually wrong. If you want something to be done, if you want it to be done efficiently, then squeeze it into one. Not necessarily by making everything tiny and impossible to read, but take away the extras, remove the embellishments, the icons and everything else, and divide it up into clear quadrants so that people can see what they're doing. And consider how long you intend to take it to complete, how long you can expect it to be done. How likely is the user to stop in the middle? This is, again, there's many tasks that are not meant to be done at once. The more likely that is, the more you need to add in places, indications and functionality. Save your work. Remind the person, did you save your work? If you leave your desk for an hour and you come back, the form that you might have lost your session, and all the work that you did might be lost if you didn't have the functionality to save it. This could be next to the customer, or if in middle of the form, you know, little button, save, and the like. And the last thing to consider is, this is more and more trendy as the time goes by, especially for managers. How likely is the user to be mobile? If your user is a manager that fills in most of their sequence forms, 70% of their forms, and I've seen the people that do on their mobile using the one-click action, or even on their laptop, this isn't a situation you want to give somebody too much information. You're not going to expect somebody to go through 10 steps of a wizard or anything like that. You want to plan the input so that it's simple, it's concise, it's small, and even you have to consider that resolution-wise fitting for a mini tablet. Many managers walk around with mini tablets with the kind of resolution. If you expect somebody to scroll right and left and up and down on the touch-sensitive mouse pad, then you have something else coming by a lot of users. It won't happen, and it will take longer for the work to be done. So these are the basic considerations. If anybody has any questions about this, about anything else that we've covered during the workflow at the beginning. Timeouts, one question only. Timeouts, when you leave the screen inactive, depend on several different parameters. If I'm not mistaken, it'll be anywhere between 20 minutes and an hour. Sometime during that time, you lose your session and you won't be able to submit information if it's left over there. And yes, Ricardo, yes, there is native support for Portuguese. You just need to have your SharePoint needs to support it. Okay, if there are any further questions, you can send them in follow-up emails. We'll be sending out our surveys later on. Thank you very much for participating, and we'll see you next month.